January 11th, 12 noon. Scott and Roberts didn't make it through the second night. We sewed them in canvas and laid them on the forecastle with the other 4. Kovacs and McSwain are hanging on by a thread, and we cannot say how much longer they will survive. Taggart is up and about, helping Mickelson and I mend the airbag, but has been experiencing occasional spells of dizziness. Our progress is impeded by the cold air. We've had to leave the envelope's thermal coils on to keep it from icing over, making it difficult to patch the rupture. And in this perpetual dusk of polar night, we can barely see the work in front of us. The captain has taken full charge of the injured men, directing Pascal to assist Bergeron and von Arkham with the engines. Their work yesterday was mostly clearing the engine room of bulky clutter and debris. They've only now begun to tackle the machines. Bergeron believes that we can have them operational within another day. That is, if he doesn't strangle von Arkham first. Apparently, the fool's incessant whistling is driving Bergeron up the wall, though it is hard to complain about von Arkham's behavior when his mechanical expertise has proved so invaluable to us. The oddball has also lent a hand in assisting LeBaron with the wireless outfit. Together, their efforts have proven moderately successful. The entire apparatus was in working order at 10 o'clock this morning, and LeBaron wasted no time in sending out an SOS over all frequencies. However, he was only halfway through the transmission when the entire module started smoking amid a series of loud electrical crackling noises. Upon inspection, he found that all but 3 of the vacuum capacitors had burnt out, and with the last of the spare tubes exhausted, our communications array is entirely up in smoke. There's no way of telling how much of the SOS was actually transmitted, so we cannot depend upon a miraculous rescue. LeBaron is now working on the airbag with Taggart, Mickelson, and I. Laying the membrane flat should prove simpler with the 3 of us. Once we've patched the rupture, we can focus on the severed strut. Bergeron and von Arkham have 1 or 2 ideas of how to rig up a makeshift replacement, as we lack the equipment to unbend the thick iron beam. We hope to be back in the air within 2 days at the latest. Our wounded won't last much longer. January 12th, 6 p.m. Catastrophe. At 10:30 this morning, I was on deck with Mickelson and LeBaron finishing the airbag repairs. Taggart had just gone below to fetch the ether hose when a loud and unmistakable noise drew our attention to stern. The ice beneath us was splitting. Before we could think to scramble for the bow, there was a resounding crack, and the ship gave a terrible pitch abaft. Unable to keep our balance, the 4 of us tumbled and slid down the deck, stopping only when we hit the bulkhead. The Revenant's hull continued to sink through the ice until the starboard stabilizer caught on the edge of the fissure. We are now poised on a sharp tilt, and the lower stern half of the hull is entirely submerged. Our meager spill on the top deck was minor compared to the concurrent mayhem in the engine room. Bergeron was quite right about the breach in the hull. As soon as the stern began to sink, frigid water flooded into the engine room, shorting out the generators, extinguishing the boilers, and rendering all of our efforts futile. Von Arkham and Pascal escaped with their lives, but Bergeron, in a foolhardy attempt to save the ether pump, stepped in the conductive water and was instantly electrocuted. Upon their exit, Pascal and von Arkham sealed tight the door, which may well have saved the rest of us, if only for a time. We have no heat, no power, no way of refilling the airbag. Our only hope is that of the half-finished SOS that LeBaron sent yesterday was somehow received. Even then, the closest port is half a continent away. There's no telling how long a rescue could take. We have all withdrawn below to the berth deck, closed all doors and hatches to contain what little heat we have. It is 15 degrees below freezing outside, but our coats are thick enough to keep us relatively warm. Von Arkham and LeBaron have managed to rig up a compact power cell to one of our prow floodlights. If, by divine fortune, the vessel should pass overhead, the faint illumination may prove enough to catch their attention in this unending twilight. Kovacs and McSwain won't last much longer. Rasmussen's breathing is twice as beleaguered in the cold air, and Taggart says he's been feeling dizzier since the power went. The captain claims that his arm is no worse, but I've caught him gritting his teeth when he thinks no one is watching. I've not said anything for his sake. Captain Douglas Bromberg is not one for showing weakness, and his gruff and brutish manner keeps us all in good spirits. Pascal coughed earlier, and Bromberg told him to button it, and we all had a good laugh. His humor is certainly preferable to our passengers. Von Arkham's levity is becoming increasingly boorish. Earlier he quipped that at least things can't get any worse, at which no one laughed, which he took to mean that no one had heard him, and so he repeated himself in a louder voice. It is unsettling how unruffled the madman is by these dire straits. I would wonder at it if I did not find him so irksome. Michelson and Pascal are going about the ship, sealing every draft they can find. In the morning we may find some overlooked avenue of salvation, but for now our only objective is to survive the night. January 13th, 3 p.m. Kovacs is dead. McSwain barely has a pulse, and Taggart's dizzy spells are getting worse. The corpses in the forecastle now outnumber the living below deck. I'm worried for the captain. Bromberg didn't sleep at all last night, and when he found Kovacs was dead, he woke me up to help sew him in canvas and carry him topside. He wanted to spare the crew the pain of waking up to another dead shipmate. I can tell that his arm is getting worse, but he won't say anything, and neither will I, out of respect. LeBaron is taking the initiative to revive our wireless capability. He has salvaged as much of our ruined outfit that isn't warped or scorched and is attempting to construct a rudimentary spark gap transmitter. If he succeeds, we'll be able to broadcast a short-range signal within close distance to one of the minor continental trade routes. Oddly enough, von Arkham has declined to assist LeBaron. Instead, he has withdrawn to his cot in steerage, where he has been for 3 hours now, doing God knows what. I hope it's colder than hell in steerage. Pascal approached me earlier with a notion. He believes that if we dig the hull out of the ice and somehow rig up a sail, we'll be able to float far enough south until we get close enough to Banks or Prince Patrick Island. Desperation has gotten the better of his wits. Our stern is already below the water level, and even if we could drain the engine room and seal the breach, we'd still be about as buoyant as a brick wall. We are irrevocably derelict. There is no possibility of getting us home under our own steam. Our steam is entirely used up. January 14th, 4 p.m. The temperature dropped 9 degrees last night. Rasmussen and McSwain didn't make it through the night, and the water in the engine room has completely frozen. As if that weren't enough, Taggart collapsed earlier from one of his dizzy spells and has yet to wake up, and LeBaron burnt himself quite badly trying to put together his spark gap. It is as if we are genuinely cursed. The only silver lining to this sea of clouds is that we aren't likely to starve with our surplus of food tins. This afternoon we were all alarmed by an abrupt clamor coming from below deck. Pascal, who has become increasingly anxious, thought the ship was falling apart, but it was in fact our wayward passenger joining us again. For reasons known only to him, von Arkham had taken it upon himself to relocate some of Dr. Sutcliffe's cargo. He made quite a racket dragging one of the tin washing basins up from the hold. The captain came close to losing his temper at von Arkham's impudence, and for a moment I thought he was going to knock that preposterous hat off of the madman's head. But instead he just barked at him to sit down and cease the racket. We've gathered up as much scrap wood as we could find and have built a fire in the tin washing basin, and that has gone some way towards staving off hypothermia. We've been casting dice to pass the time. Mickelson's already won half of my money and all of Bromberg's, but we keep playing. Most of us are fairly resilient to the disease that is cabin fever when we are free to roam the ship performing our routine duties. But confined to the same frigid cabin with nothing to do for days at a time, The monotony can be debilitating. I worry for Pascal, whose nerves are wearing thin, and for the captain who bears all the hardships we do, but with the added weight of command and a broken arm. He is a better man than I. Whether or not he has truly lost all hope, he keeps his resolve in front of his crew. As for myself, I know how astronomical the chances are of us being rescued, but I do not despair. Perhaps I am made of sterner stuff than I realized, or perhaps the certainty of doom has yet to fully sink in. Either would explain my unprecedented composure, but not von Arkham's. He chuckles to himself when there is nothing to laugh at. He whistles that confounded shanty when the rest of us are moaning in discomfort. Every time he catches one of us staring at him, he grins and winks behind his goggles. There are 9 dead bodies piled on deck. What reason is there to grin? I would take such absurd whimsy in the face of death as proof that he has lost his mind, but he was like this from the moment he stepped on board. I suppose it is preferable to having a passenger who is prone to hysterics and panic, but his peculiar capriciousness is nonetheless vexing.